Pleasant good morning to those of you assembled in this room, as well as those who are in the virtual space, those viewing by television and listening by radio. I am William Hodge, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education. This morning, the Ministry of Education is pleased to welcome you to this press conference where we have come to interrogate the results of the CXC results for St. Kitts and Nevis for 2020. I want to give recognition to our registrar, our local registrar, Mr. Solomon Claxton, who is on study leave in the United States. I'm certain that he is listening, he's viewing. We also want to recognize our acting registrar, Ms. Jacqueline Fleming, who is in Anguilla, and she too, I'm certain, is listening, is viewing. In the meantime, the work of our registrar is continued by one of our education officers in the person of Mrs. Lisa Romaine Pistana. Allow me to welcome all of you from the various media houses that have come to be part of this press conference. We want to thank you for your very timely response. Many times in education, many persons, including some teachers, parents, members of the community, are more interested in the product than the process. And so we don't give much attention to teaching and learning sometimes. But when the results are back, it's a lot of enthusiasm, it's a beehive and all of that. This morning I want to say to us as citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis that when it comes to education, we have to get a little bit more involved and interested in the process. So we just don't leave this up to our teachers and administrators and education officials. We must be in it from the beginning. And so we are able to judge, to evaluate, and assess how we were able to move through the process to get to the product that we are most interested in and the product that we come year after year to interrogate, to question about. We are aware that this year, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, CXC had to come up with a plan and to make some alterations to the administration of the exams. We recognize that the written paper, the paper 2, the structured question paper, was omitted from the examination this year. And so students were evaluated on the multiple choice papers and the SBAs, school-based assessment. We recognize too that across the region there has been quite a bit of disquiet in terms of the results that some ministries of education received and perhaps were not in alignment with the expectations. Here in St. Kitts and Nevis, we do have a little bit of concern in relation to some of these matters. These will be further ventilated during this press conference, I'm sure. I am pleased to welcome and to recognize the panel this morning that is headed by our Minister of Education, our new Minister of Education, and this would be his first time participating in this exercise, the Honorable Jonel Powell. Next to Minister Powell, we have our senior Assistant Secretary, Dr. Tricia Esdale, herself a former Chief Education Officer and very much connected to this process. On the extreme right, we have our current Chief Education Officer, Dr. Debbie Isaac. This is also Dr. Isaac's first participation in this exercise. We're happy to welcome you as well. On my immediate left is the principal of the Virtuals High School, newly installed acting principal of the Virtuals High School, Mr. Miguel Thomas. And Mr. Thomas is himself just literally out of the classroom, a teacher of geography, and also served as the school's registrar. And so he is very much connected to this process. On the far left, we have Dr. Jacqueline Austin, president of our Clarence Fitzgerald Bryan College, right here where the press conference is coming from. This will be Dr. Austin's second time around in this process, and would be addressing those aspects relating to the CAPE examinations. So without further ado, we are happy to welcome you again, those of you who are viewing and listening, and we are going to ask each member of the panel to make a brief overview of perhaps about 3 minutes, with the exception of the Honorable Minister, who would present first and would give more of a detailed analysis, report, comments. Honorable Minister Powell.
Mr. Chairman, Permanent Secretary, William Hodge, Senior Assistant Secretary, Dr. Tricia Esdale, Chief Education Officer, Dr. Debbie Isaac, Dr. Jacqueline Austin, President of Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College, Mr. Miguel Thomas, Principal at Virtuals High School, media, all those listening and following via TV, radio, internet, good grades that they wanted to, and commiserations to those who didn't. But there will be other opportunities for those who wish to redo. But let me get straight into the meat of the matter. This report provides an overview of the performance of candidates from St. Kitts and Nevis during the 2020 CXC examinations, that being CAPE, CSEC, CSEC. The content herein is based on preliminary results and is being presented against the backdrop that a number of subjects were ungraded. Possible reasons for ungraded results include absenteeism or non-submission of SBAs and internal assessments, or some component of the same. Likewise, SBAs and internal assessments could have been submitted but inadvertently overlooked or not processed by CXC. There have been minimal cases where SBAs were not submitted for private candidates, but reports indicate that all requirements were fulfilled by school and college candidates. Feedback from CXC would provide specific details in relation to the actual reasons for ungraded results being awarded to candidates from St. Kitts and Nevis. Candidates are seeking to challenge grades received by utilizing CXC's query and review process. Therefore, final statistics may be impacted. The official release of CXC results is undoubtedly the most anticipated event on the ministry's academic year. Ministry officials, principals, teachers, private tutors, candidates, and parents alike are usually cautiously optimistic, awaiting this defining moment with bated breath. 2020 has, however, been extraordinarily exceptional. Although the unprecedented impact of COVID-19 within the education sector is yet to be supported with empirical data, we are all highly cognizant of the single most important fact that this pandemic has disrupted every facet of our lives and has left permanent scars and unfillable gaps within our learning space. The premature closure of schools resulting in the non-completion of SBAs and other moderation exercises, along with CXC's additional requirements for this year's examinations, were the source of great anxiety. The Ministry's intervention to request permission from the COVID-19 task force for exam candidates to return to the institutions to complete all requirements alleviated much of the anxiety experienced. Anxiety experience was also heightened with CXC's highly debated decision to offer a modified approach to the 2020 exams with only two components. Grades returned this year have been awarded based on candidates' performance on paper 1, which was multiple choice, and school-based assessments, SBAs, or the alternative paper 3 to SBAs for private candidates. Exceptions to the foregoing required candidates to complete paper 2 and/or additional components for the following subject areas: modern languages, French and Spanish, human and social biology, music in the practical element, and theater arts, final production. CXC's release of results on Tuesday, 22nd September, has generated much discussion locally and regionally. Notwithstanding, our candidates must all be congratulated for having skillfully navigated the new norm under which they were expected to write their exams. I now give specifics for the Caribbean Secondary Certificate Examinations, or CSEC. St. Kitts and Nevis entered some 1,762 candidates to write the CSEC examinations in 32 subject areas this year, realizing an increase of 101 candidates over 2019. 1,327 candidates wrote exams in St. Kitts, while 742 of whom entered were private candidates, while 585 were students registered across our 7 secondary institutions. Our sister island of Nevis recorded 435 candidates writing CSEC examinations in 28 subject areas. 185 of that total were school candidates, while 250 registered privately. Based on final statistics published by CXC, the Federation recorded 6,342 subject entries for CSEC examinations this year. Although 6,342 subject entries were recorded from the 1,762 candidates, 6,079 were actually reported by the CXC Council as being sat, with 1,464 entries in Nevis and 4,615 in St. Kitts. The fallout of 263 was due to absenteeism. Acceptable grades. Acceptable grades for CSEC examinations are grades 1 to 3. During the examination period under review, St. Kitts and Nevis recorded 5,109 acceptable grades, some 818 more than last year. Grades are distributed as follows: 1,486 grade 1s, 1,920 grade 2s, and 1,703 grade 3s. Secondary schools in St. Kitts returned 3,143 acceptable grades, while those in Nevis recorded 1,012. Private candidates in St. Kitts attained 724 passing grades, with 230 in Nevis. I must note that Washington Archibald High School amassed the highest acceptable grades, being 829 from 999 entries. Among schools in St. Kitts, while the Charlestown Secondary emerged as the school with the highest acceptable grades, some 568 from 642 entries there in Nevis. I do note that each school is the largest school on their respective island. Of the 5,109 acceptable grades returned for CSEC examinations, 4,155 were obtained by school candidates and 954 by private registrants, for a national pass rate of 84.03%, as against 80.37% recorded in 2019. So we are pleased to report an increase in our national pass rate this year over last year. The Federation recorded a national pass rate of 86.32% for English A, which saw 700 acceptable grades from 811 entries. This is a slight increase over 2019, which realized 84.15%. There was, however, a marked decrease in English B, which scored 49 acceptable grades from 69 entries, when compared to 61 acceptable grades from 71 entries recorded in 2019, with a pass rate of 85.92%. This year's English B returned a national pass rate of 71.01%. Mathematics returned 503 acceptable grades from 832 entries with a pass rate of 60.46%, showing a modest increase over 2019's 51.06%. Principles of business, office administration, EDPM, physical education, and information technology continue to be popular subject choices nationally, returning remarkable acceptable grades and a national pass rate of over 90% in each discipline. 970 less than acceptable grades, representing 4, 5, and 6, from 6,079 entries were returned nationally. Though a mere 15.9%, this should not go unnoticed, as it points to the need to engage students differently to assist them in performing creditably, as 970 less acceptable grades are 970 too many. The award of ungraded results for CSEC candidates who should have received grades are being investigated, and an update will be provided in a subsequent report. I now turn to the Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Exams, or CAPE. 470 candidates were entered to write the Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Examination, CAPE, this year in 27 subject areas across 5 CAPE centers, namely the CFBC, the CFBC Adult and Continuing Education, Her Majesty's Prison, Nevis Sixth Form, and Nevis Private, realizing a slight decrease in 26 candidates over 2019. A total of 47 CAPE units were attempted, 24 Unit 1s and 23 Unit 2s, along with the general education courses, namely Communication Studies, Caribbean Studies, and Integrated Mathematics. In St. Kitts, 341 candidates wrote exams from a fleet of 25 subjects, while 58 of whom were private candidates, while 283 were college candidates. Nevis recorded 129 candidates writing CAPE examinations in 27 areas. 122 candidates were registered at the Nevis Sixth Form College, while 7 were entered as private candidates. Preliminary statistics from CXC confirm that 1,607 subject entries were sat from the registered amount of 1,744 by CAPE candidates in St. Kitts and Nevis this year. This reflects a decrease in both registered candidates and subject entries from 2019. Of the 1,607 subject entries, 1,503 were sat by college registrants, with 492 from Nevis Sixth Form and 200 and 1,101 from the CFBC. 98 private candidates in St. Kitts and 6 in Nevis brought total subject entries for this group to 104. Of the 47 CAPE units written, 40 units returned acceptable grades, with grades for 5 units still outstanding: French, Spanish, Units 1 and 2, and Pure Mathematics, Unit 1, for some students. Acceptable grades. Acceptable grades returned for CAPE subjects by our 5 centers are as follows. Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College returned 919 out of 1,011 subject entries. CFBC Adult and Continuing Education Division obtained some 61 of 67 entries. Her Majesty's Prison amassed 28 out of 31. Nevis Sixth Form obtained 441 out of 492 entries, and Nevis Private returned 5 acceptable grades from 6 entries sat. Based on the preliminary statistics provided, the Ministry of Education is pleased to announce that our CAPE candidates returned a national pass rate of 90.48% in this year's examinations. We are cognizant of the issues surrounding ungraded results here in St. Kitts and Nevis and throughout the region, and will allow the query and review process to work. CXC has committed to rectifying those issues which can be resolved and providing updated results to all ministries of education. It is important to indicate that the award of ungraded to any candidate could be attributed to any of the following reasons: no internal assessment records or samples received, paper component not received, internal assessment and paper component not received, records and samples received but inadvertently overlooked. The Ministry is aware of legitimate cases related to ungraded results for candidates who wrote pure mathematics, Spanish and French at the CAPE level. While some candidates may have valid reasons such as death in the family or illness for not writing examinations, the Ministry is not oblivious of those who decided not to attempt subjects for which they were registered both at CAPE and CSEC levels, and hence were awarded ungraded. Statistics reveal that other candidates who wrote the very same subjects have received valid grades. The Ministry is investigating the legitimate cases and anticipate that these would be rectified during the query and review process, after which period an updated report will be presented. The Ministry commends all CSEC and CAPE candidates within institutions in St. Kitts and Nevis who have worked assiduously and finished well. Candidates who did not perform as creditably as they would have wished are encouraged to continue their relentless efforts. Registration for January 2021 CSEC examinations is now open and provides an opportunity for resits if candidates so desire. Ministry stakeholders, including principals and teachers, are to be formally recognized for the commitment, dedication, and resilience exhibited to ensure that candidates were adequately prepared to write this year's CXC examinations. Together, our actions have confirmed that unprecedented times required unprecedented support, and that support was undeniably overwhelming. This concludes my report on our 2020 CXC results.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. At this point, we are going to move to our next speaker, and we're going to have Dr. Tricia Esdale giving us her brief opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Hodge, and I'd like to say good morning, all. This has been a very challenging year around the region and I think around the world. COVID-19 has had a significant impact on education systems, and as a result, a significant impact on the results in the learning of our children within the education system. Naturally, around the Caribbean, as we begin to look at CXC results, there are concerns. Here in St. Kitts and Nevis, as was said, we will be looking into those legitimate cases where there may be reasonable cause for concern. But overwhelmingly, I do believe that St. Kitts and Nevis has done incredibly well this year. When I look at the results, I see a trend in our secondary schools. There are some schools that, despite the challenges, would still have entered a significantly large number of students. And this is to be commended. When we look at results, one of the things that we pay attention to at the Ministry of Education is the actual cohort. So it's not just the number of students entered, it's the number of students who actually are registered and who attend that school, the number of students within a particular form as against the number of students who register for examinations. And we are seeing an upward trend with more students being given an opportunity. And so for those principals who would have persevered and who would have stuck to that trend of making that opportunity available despite challenges, I commend them. Further, I would like to say that in looking at our results, particularly in areas of English and math, which are so critical to the future of our students, whether they're going into the workforce or continuing on to tertiary education and university, we have seen some modest increases. In particular, I note an increase in math, which is significant for us. Having been a part of this process this would be my 4th year, I recognize that we're seeing an increase in math this year. I think in 2019, we would have returned, I think there's about a 10% increase this year between 2020 and 2019 when we look at our results, and that is commendable because I think throughout the region and throughout the world, we know that mathematics and education in mathematics continues to be a challenge, and that many students shy away from the challenge of taking mathematics, but it's so critical to their futures. And so I was very pleased to see that modest increase this year for our 2019 results. In addition, I would like to say that as we look at our subjects across the board that our students are taking, I do want to encourage students that will sit this year and in future years to really look at the area of information technology. When we look at business subjects, when we look at technology and TVET subjects, we find a lot of students sit things like EDPM. And we know that electronic documentation preparation is so critical to your ability to work, to perform in school and in the workplace. But if COVID-19 has taught us anything, it's that we must increase our skills when it comes to technology, when it comes to media, when it comes to communications, because many of the barriers for continued education here and around the world, they are addressed through continued and distance education. And that means that both teachers and students must be au fait with what it means to utilize technology, and not just for social media and not just for gaming, but for work and for study. And so I encourage students this year and in the future years not to shy away from those more technical subjects and not to shy away from technology courses. And as I wrap up, I just want to say congratulations to all the students who, as Minister Powell would have said, would have received the marks that they hoped to. I also want to encourage those who may not have performed as well as they would have liked to continue to try. Anybody who's ever been successful, they've also failed. There's no success without failure, but failure can be a stepping stone, it can be a learning experience. And most successful people have one thing in common: they persevere. They persevere, they continue to work hard, and they do not allow setbacks to throw them off course. So whether you would have received the marks that you wanted to this year, or you hope for an improvement, I encourage all to continue moving forward. I also want to commend all of the teachers and all of the parents especially who would have worked so hard to keep their students on track. We know that parent commitment and parent involvement is critically important in education. Whenever we reach out to the public as a ministry, we always try to engage parents, we always try to encourage parents. And knowing that for the most part our schools were closed, I know that a lot of what we see in our students' success can be directly laid at the feet of parents and of course at the students who work so hard. I also want to commend those teachers who, even during periods of closure, before we had our platform for continued education up, would have reached out to their students, would have called, would have started their WhatsApp groups, would have met on Zoom and Google Chat and whatever platform they could to rally their students and to provide some additional support. So to everyone who would have made this year's successes possible, I want to extend a thank you personally and on behalf of the Ministry of Education. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Esdale. We're now going to call on our Chief Education Officer, Dr. Debbie Isaac, to bring us her brief opening statement. Dr. Isaac.
Thank you, Chair P.S. Hodge. Must recognize with us our Minister of Education, Youth, Sports and Culture, Honorable Jonel Powell, Dr. Tricia Esdale, Senior Assistant Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Dr. Jacqueline Austin, President of Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College, Mr. Miguel Thomas, Principal of the Verchild High School. The media personnel were with us, those listening via radio, television, internet. A pleasant good morning again. The releasing of the CSEC and CAPE results has always been a major event on the Ministry of Education's academic calendar. This year, it was even more anticipated as the timing was different, coupled with so many other changes due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Ministry of Education had several online meetings via Zoom with CXC officials along with the other territories within the regions as we grappled with the many changes that would have had to be implemented in this year's exams. Changes such as the dates for the exams to be administered and the structure of the papers to be written, plus the conditions under which the exams would have taken due to the physical distancing protocols. These were tough decisions that the ministries of education in the regions had to make as we embrace the new norm. The Ministry of Education is grateful for the dedication and the hard work of the acting local registrar, CXC registrar, Ms. Jacqueline Fleming, along with Mr. Solomon Claxton, as was shared earlier on study leave, and their team, as they ably guided us through these uncharted waters. Special commendation must be expressed to all our students who registered, and not only registered, but they sat the exams amidst the challenges they would have faced. Some of the challenges included the having to exercise discipline in accessing instructions virtually, something that would have been new for them, many of them. The sacrifice of completing their SBAs in a timely manner, in spite of the lockdown periods, and cooperating with teachers, parents, and the COVID-19 protocols as we all sought to comply with the regulations that were implemented to help mitigate the spread of the coronavirus in our federation. Special recognition must be given to the private candidates who would have had to face the challenges to sit the exams, having to juggle work and study. In spite of the challenges encountered, there was an increase in the number of private candidates who sat the exam this year as opposed to last year. We say special thanks to all our teachers for their commitment, dedication, and resilience, duly noted by the long hours spent in assisting students to complete SBAs, practicing the past papers, and instructing them using a blended approach. To the administration, principals, and their management teams of the various schools, you too must be applauded for working through the vacation period, for inspiring the teachers, and making the necessary preparation for the returning of students to the spaces. The parents of the students who sat the exam this year must be noted for due commendation as well. Many would have struggled with anxieties and fears of the unknown, yet continue to encourage and assist their children to attend their classes and impress on them to remain focused in spite of the many challenges that they would have encountered. I must reiterate that in spite of the many challenges faced this year, as our minister noted earlier, the national pass rate has increased from 80.37% in 2019 to 84.03% in 2020. However, the Ministry of Education is still very concerned with the number of subjects that were ungraded. As was reported by the CXC registrar, possible reasons for the ungraded result include absenteeism or non-submission of SBAs and IAs. We are awaiting feedback after an investigation would have been carried out, and an update would be given subsequently or when it's made available. We also realize that the data reveal that there were 263 candidates who registered for the exam and did not show up to sit the exams. This level of absenteeism would have had contributed to the number of ungraded subjects. As was stated earlier, the actual reasons for absenteeism are not fully known, but in some cases, absenteeism was due to the death of family members, and we know what was happening when the COVID struck, even in our federation. Thank goodness that we did not have any death, but there are persons who died during those times. Illness, as well as lack of preparation by the candidates due to the challenges faced by COVID-19, could have also posed that the reason for their absenteeism. The Ministry of Education on St. Kitts and Nevis will also like to commend the CXC for releasing this year's results in the time frame that was promised. We congratulate all who were successful in this year's exam and wish them the very best in their future endeavors. For those who may not have done so well, I concur with Dr. Esdale that you do not give up, but continue to strive for excellence. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Isaac. Just want to remind that the press conference is being carried on all of ZIZ's platform, Facebook, YouTube, radio, television. We have 2 more presentations, and at this point we're going to take Mr. Miguel Thomas, the acting principal from the Virtuals High School, to make his presentation.
Minister of Education, Jonel Powell, Senior Assistant Secretary, Dr. Tricia S. Dale, Dr. Debbie Isaac, Chief Education Officer, Dr. Jacqueline Austin, President of the Clarence Fitzroy College, Permanent Secretary, Mr. Vincent Hodge, members of the media, viewing audience, a pleasant morning. As Mr. Hodge identified me, I am the principal of the Virtuals High School, and for the past few years, I've served as the registrar for the CXC registrar for the Virtuals High School, one of my duties as a senior management member. I want to take this opportunity to express profound gratitude to many stakeholders. First, let me start from our persons who work at the early childhood sector. They would have laid the foundation for our senior students. We also have those who imparted the knowledge, skills, and attitudes in the primary sector of our education system. Those in high school, oftentimes we focus on our fifth form teachers only, but it's a combined effort to get our students to the point where they need to be. Lest I forget, those stakeholders who are in our communities. Want to extend from the vendors to the cleaners to create those safe havens for our children on behalf of myself and other principals across the Federation, and to our parents and guardians who have so ably supported our students. To the Almighty Father, I'm grateful. As the newly instated principal of the Virtuals High School and the one who deals with CXC or CSEC and CSEC related matters for the institution, I was first of all proud for the Virtuals High School, that is. I'm proud to report that we had 69 out of 77 students sitting both English A and mathematics. That's something that we pride ourselves in. Irrespective of what a pass rate might look, we always afford our students the opportunity to take CSEC English A and mathematics. And those students who did not sit were either in what we know as a learning support stream, or they would have sat it in a previous academic year while they were in fourth or third form, but everyone else was given the opportunity, irrespective. We also noted that 13 disciplines attained 100% pass rate, but we are not so much focused on our pass rates. We are eternally grateful for our students who, and I'm certain that all of the principals can give similar sentiments, for those who passed and for those who were given the opportunities to attempt particular CSEC subjects. As I stand here, though, I must express some dissatisfaction with the results garnered from the CXC. As the registrar, I pride myself in looking at trends, and even as a CSEC geography teacher, I registered some dissatisfaction. For one of the strongest cohorts that I've ever entered, they returned the poorest results, all passed, but they returned the poorest results in my teaching career. That is very, very dissatisfying, and it's something that needs to be looked into. I've already penned a letter. I have looked at the trends over the years, and I'm displeased, especially when all of your students would have gone in with a full SBA score. It's quite dissatisfying, and to see the profiles that the students returned, because it's one thing to examine different disciplines and recognize 100% passes, but when you scrutinize the profiles, you recognize that this does not reflect the quality of students that you would have entered, and something needs to be done. And so I'm going to take further action through the appropriate channels We recorded a number of other discrepancies where students' grades are concerned. We are grateful again for students who would have passed, but if I might add just a few examples for those of us who are in the media and who might want to further understand what I'm talking about. In several instances, or in one instance, we had one student who did not complete a component, did not attempt a component of an exam, so the child received 0 for that component. However, the child came back with a grade 1, and the teacher is in disbelief, so that's something that must be addressed. In another instance, we had one student recording a grade 1 with 1A and 2 C's in the profile. I've never seen that in the history of anything. I'm grateful again, but that is something, justice must be served. We recognize too that 2 students with the lowest SBA scores for a particular subject registered grade 1s, and the students with the highest set of scores came back with the lower grades. Those are the things that we are seeing in our local context, and we recognize that there are major discrepancies as it relates to the virtual high school, and I'm certain that upon closer scrutiny of the results that other principals can make similar sentiments, and I trust that we get some redress in these matters on CXC's path. And so once again, I am grateful for this opportunity. I'm grateful for the product on a national level. However, justice is what must be served, and if the students attained a particular grade, then that should be reflected. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Principal. I saw all the media houses writing as you spoke, so we can anticipate a very robust question session. We want to invite at this time Dr. Jacqueline Austin from the CFBC College to make a presentation. Dr. Austin.
"2020 is the year of perfect vision." Why do I say perfect vision? Because it allows us to examine and to analyze the educational ecosystem against global standards. Please allow me to recognize the Honorable Minister Jonel Powell, members of this distinguished head table, media, personnel, videographers, etc., our viewers, our listeners. A pleasant good morning to all of you. You would have heard this morning the Honorable Minister share the report from CXC concerning the results. I would not want to belabor the point, but I want to say to those viewing and listening that we here at the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College, we have a specific emphasis on technical vocational education and training, but also STEAM. What is STEAM? Science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. We are aligning our curricula with the labor market needs of the Federation, the region, and dare I say, the world. And we see the crucial importance of technology and science at this time. We are very much dependent on the scientists to guide our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I, as the president of the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College, would want to commend all those who sat the exams, the CXC exams, and were able to attain a grade. At the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College, as you heard, we had in CAPE, that's the Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Examination, a total of 919 acceptable grades out of 1,011 entries. We have recorded a 90% pass rate. If we look at CFBC, adult and continuing education, out of the 67 entries, we recorded 61 acceptable grades. That is 91%. We know that these are indeed unprecedented times, and there was immense sacrifice, not only on the part of our faculty or students and staff, but the parents who really invested in the education of their children and wards. And I want to say that we will continue here at the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College to support our students. We know it's difficult. We know that some students didn't even have access to Wi-Fi and the technologies required, but they persevered. We have seen a 100% pass rate in digital media. And this says to me that we're thinking seriously about the future, and we are seeking to be responsive. There was an equally commendable performance in mathematics as we continue to ensure, as I started by saying, that our curricula is aligned to labor market needs, to entrepreneurship, and to the needs of the region and the world. Again, I take this opportunity to extend heartiest congratulations to all those who sat the exams and performed favorably. We have noted here at this press conference thus far that there are challenges throughout the region as it relates to the response from CXC. There are even protests in the region, but I also note that there are inquiries to be made, there are questions to be asked, and responses to be given. So I await those responses with patience, but I look forward to a continued collaborative relationship with the Caribbean Examinations Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Austin. At this point, we would like to engage you, the various media houses. Please indicate that you are asking a question by show of your hand. Once you're given permission to speak, we ask that you say your name and to identify the media house that you represent. We would like to have as many persons, or to give the opportunity to as many persons as possible to ask their questions. So we don't expect one media house to dominate. You may have a second or third opportunity, depending. So we're ready to roll. One, two, three.
Yes. My question is, in terms of the competency of those who would have who have written CXC this year, there's some concern that with the absence of that paper 2, it may not directly reflect the aptitude and the understanding, or the level of understanding that the students may have. So, long and short of it is, students, colloquially speaking, got away with easing through the exams because the paper 1s may be a little bit easier than the paper 2, and then you have the SBA to buffer you, especially in the math department. How would you respond to criticisms of that nature for those students who are passing this year? The second question is, how many queries would the Ministry of Education have gotten so far, or concerns that would have been expressed so far with regards to the results in question. And this question is to Dr. Esdale. You're speaking about legitimate results. Can you give us a better sense of what you're talking about when you say legitimate results this time around?
Thank you, Mr. Abel. Actually, I'm going to ask Dr. Esdale to respond to both of those questions. First, the one in relation to the aptitude of the students who would not have had the opportunity to do the structured paper. And then the second question. You can use the mic. We would respond to the number of queries from school. Well, I can say that now. Schools are in the process of documenting their queries. They have until today to give us the first draft of their queries. The deadline by which they should reach to CXC is actually later, is in October. Apart from Mr. Thomas, we have not received any other direct complaint from principals as yet, but they are putting their queries together in terms of the number of persons whose grade they might want to query. So, okay.
Concerns with respect to the structure of CXC examinations this year. Of course, we all would have noted that, yes, students would have sat paper 1 and their SBAs, and that would have been used to comprise students' scores. And so this year is distinctly marked by the absence of the paper 2. One of the things that we have to look at is that when we look at assessment and examinations, the structure of an exam can change without a loss of reliability and validity. And CXC would have invested a significant amount of time in making the paper 1 very robust in its ability to assess a student's knowledge, their understanding of concepts. We are used to a particular style of examination, but a change in examination does not make it any less valid this year as opposed to last year. I also want to point to the fact that when we look around the world and we look at examinations for entry to universities, for example, by and large, they're all electronic and multiple choice. The questions are designed to get at a person's conceptual understanding of the subject matter. And that is what is most important, and that is what CXC would have done this year. So I know we are used to our traditions, but one of the things that we have to look at is that assessment changes, and the nature of assessment must keep pace with the way in which students are assessed. As we move more and more to electronic means of assessment, the design of assessments must change. We would have seen that happen this year, and it was radical for us because it was so very different from what we were used to. But with respect to the construction of the test and its reliability and its validity, I do not have concerns with this construction. I do believe that the time and the effort to put together paper 1 would have been well spent, and that it does capture our students' understanding of the subject matters which they sat. With respect to the second question, which dealt with the issue of legitimate, every year, results are always queried. Every year, we speak to and use the term legitimate, so legitimate concerns. And so I use that term again this year. When we talk about legitimate concerns, what we're looking at in particular isn't just a sweeping under the rug of everything being related to COVID. So if a student doesn't do as well as they thought, it's COVID related, or it's examination related, or it's marking related. We can come up with a whole host of excuses for why we don't do as well as we do, and never really get at the heart of the matter. There's also the issue of student performance, of nerves, of preparation, a whole list of things. So when we talk about legitimate concerns, what we're looking at, and this particularly happens at the level of the school. So while a student may be disappointed, and while a parent might be disappointed, at the school level, a school has a 5-year record of a student and their performance. And that school makes an assessment of what is a reasonable return for this student. Now, I will say, they don't always get it right. But I find that when they don't get it right, it's usually favorable, meaning you think a student does not stand a good chance of passing, and they surprise you because they do pass. They knuckle down, they work hard, they take extra classes, they do the things they need to do, and they're successful. So when we look at the cases this year, and we weigh concerns of students and their families, I think we will take all of those concerns seriously, but at the end of the day, some of those student concerns will also be backed by their academic history. So when we talk about legitimate concerns, we're talking about students' academic history in one instance. The second thing that we're looking at is inconsistencies that we would have seen in the results. And our principal, Miguel Thomas, would have spoken very eloquently to this concern. And so we must look at the pattern of results that are returned for students. He would have alluded to someone getting a 1, is it? And having an A and 2 C's. And some other cases, but that one struck me as he said it. It is unusual. And so these are the things that we look at. So whether a student's score is excellent or a student's score is less than what they would have hoped to attain, the scrutiny must still be brought to bear to all scores. So it's not that it's brought to bear only for those who are displeased, okay? Because there must be a level of validity to the assessment of student marks, and it's across the board whether the student has been successful or not. So as countries and ministries of education look at the results that are coming forward, what they're looking for is a pattern of irregularity as we begin to break down those marks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Esdale. I wish to add something to this. Some persons are of the view that multiple choice papers are the easier papers, or the easiest papers. Not necessarily so. I think from my own experience that students have strength in multiple choice. Their strengths lie in multiple choice. For some students, their strength lies in the structured paper. And I want to say, and some students do very well on the SBAs as well. But on Friday, we were summoned to a meeting with CXC virtually because they were preparing for a press conference later that day on Friday. And it was pointed out very clearly that every SBA was scrutinized. Traditionally, it's a 30% sample of SBA papers that are sent on to CXC. This year, every paper for every subject, for every student had to be uploaded. And CXC is reporting that on some SBAs, they didn't name any territory. I can't say if St. Kitts Nevis falls into that, but it was pointed out very vividly that on some SBA papers, the teachers gave 100% marks, full marks. And when the paper was examined, all of the questions were not answered. all of the questions on the paper, the SBA product, the questions were not answered in full, but yet the student was given a full grade. And the minister could attest to that. He was in the meeting. So those are the kind of variables that we have to watch when we, examine somebody who might not, who we expected to bring back a good grade, didn't. The SBA went on, but was all the work completed on that SBA? Yes.
Andre Huey, SK Newsline. This question, I have a question for Mr. Thomas, Mr. Miguel Thomas of the Rothschild High School. Do you think that the discrepancies you saw in the results had to do, probably in part, or maybe to a large part, to the new grading procedures that CXC announced earlier this year? Also, and anyone from the head table could answer this, some clarification on the querying of results. Now, the registrar of CXC had indicated that, or CXC has indicated that you pay $30 per subject that you're querying. Is this something that will be borne by the candidates, or will the government collectively foot this bill, the Ministry of Education? And on the issue of absenteeism, if there are in cases of absenteeism from students, we've seen over the years there were a number of students who did not show up for exams. Will a special consideration be given, or will it be a case-by-case basis to determine whether a student was missing for an exam, it had to do with some of the challenges due to COVID, or just negligence on their part, as was seen in some cases prior to this year's exams?
Okay, thank you, Mr. I'm going to ask the Chief Education Officer to respond to the absenteeism question. Mr. Thomas will respond to that question directed to him, and I would respond to the question about paying for the review.
Thank you, P.S. Hodge. Just to piggyback a bit on the question that was asked about the criticisms, not sure if you got the answer to that as well. In terms of what people are saying about the structure, is not having the paper two, and the criticisms. Yes, there have been criticisms, even throughout the region. In fact, there are some territories that they were so adamant about not having paper two, because they feel that that paper two would sort of help in terms of showing the true potential of the students, because it gives you a chance to express yourself on the paper, unlike the multiple choice. So indeed, yeah, there were criticisms in our nation as well as in the territories that do engage CXC. In terms of the absenteeism, we realize this is not really what happened just this year, but it happens every year. We know that there's some person, especially this year, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, some persons were not able to interact with their teachers, with the persons, maybe in the private candidates, with the instructors, due to the lockdown, due to not having devices, and even access to internet. And so they may not have felt that they were ready, they were prepared. And so instead of going and just trying, they just decided to opt out. That's what we're getting from feedback. Some persons were, experiencing difficulties. It's like the psychosocial. Some persons were really having a very difficult time, and they just decided not to show up. But indeed, we have to dig further, especially going to the schools, engaging our guidance counselors, and finding out in terms of the private candidates who did not show up after they have registered. This would have to be a sort of conversation, probably with the instructors that were assigned to them, to find out their real reason for not showing up. But absenteeism is something that happens each year. It's just that we see that there has been a sort of increase for this year's exams. Thank you.
Mr. Thomas.
Good morning. Good morning. 1, 2. Good morning. All right. As it relates to your question about the grading system that was used, from where I sit, I would like to know the grading system that was used as well. As we are aware, CXC has never published the ranges that they use to determine a student's final grade. However, as I said in my presentation earlier, certain things would raise red flags or alarm you. And I've taught CXC now for 10 years. This is my 11th year, and again, one of the things that you do is that when results are returned, you not just take them for what they are. You do some analysis, and that's one of the things that I do, and the teachers at the school, they know me for that in particular. And so when you recognize that there is no clarity as it relates to what grading system is used, and some might say that is okay. But when you see a situation, for instance, where one of your top English students is going to get a 45 out of 45, and yes, SBAs could have been remarked, but once there is a remark, it generally affects the entire cohort. But when one of your top students, English students, is going to get 45 out of 45 and then return a grade 4 in a particular subject, then that's really cause for concern, because with a multiple choice, again, it's not that it's about easy or hard for me, but you would have to tell me then that that student did not do anything on that paper, essentially would have returned a grade 4 in that particular subject. And we are blessed with some really good teachers who have quite a number of experience with grading the SBAs. I am one of those teachers, and I know that as a geography teacher, practical skills, that's a part of our component of the exam that students don't readily like to do on a national scene. But over the years, most of my students, they have returned A's, and the relatively weaker ones would return B's in that profile. And again, I have the graphs to show. And this year, the overwhelming profile was D across the board. And I know that is not reflective of any of the students in my cohort. Apart from this year, none of the students have ever returned a D in that profile. You understand? And so those are some of the things that I looked at and I examined. And so I would really like to know what grading system was used to determine the students' final grades. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas and Dr. Isaac. I want to say one of the things that CXC pointed out in that same meeting on Friday was the fact that when they look at the statistics from 2017 up to 2020, there wasn't any big disparity in previous years in terms of the number of students who actually passed or failed. It was within the scope. I want to add a little bit to the absenteeism. This year, the numbers perhaps are the highest. And I guess because of our situation, we are in extraordinary times. But this is something that we addressed in 2018. And in 2019, there was a decrease in the number of absenteeism. In 2018, we said that there's a policy that we can enforce to have students, parents, refund the government for examinations paid for where students don't turn up to write. We're not going to make that threat again. We have to sit down with our principals and the registrar and examine this carefully. Our young persons who are writing examinations today have to be reminded of the stories and the struggles of persons like myself and somewhat younger who had to come up with money on their own to pay for the examinations. Our young people cannot get away with the idea that everything is going to be handed to them on a platter. This is hard-earned money that those of us who pay social services levy that supports education. This is coming out of our paycheck. And I'm saying that this was a privilege that came to this country during the prime ministership of the Right Excellent Sir Kennedy Simmons, when the SELF project was introduced. The SELF project provided books for students to be able to have his or her own textbook. The SELF project provided the payment of examination fees for students, and we cannot take this lightly. Yes, we know there will be some genuine cases where persons probably they just won't prepare for the examination, but this is something that we intend to address at each school level, so the principals under the sound of my voice can begin to examine their own situation. But it is something that we have to look into. And this is an opportunity for me to respond to something that I heard a politician saying a few weeks ago on the radio. And the politician started out by saying that persons are hurting. They don't have money to buy textbooks. They don't have money to buy uniform. They don't have money for examination fees. Well, I am saying that that information is inaccurate. That information is inaccurate. For the entire summer, I was hearing announcements where students in need of uniform can go to various locations to get their uniforms. Students are provided with textbooks. Even the persons who would not qualify in terms of their income, they are getting textbooks without paying for them. The same thing with examinations. Examinations are paid for everybody who come. And some of these persons are not in the bracket to get that benefit, but they do. But people in the country know, persons in the country know that those statements were not true, because they themselves are the beneficiaries of these same products. Lunch, a hot meal daily is provided for all children in the Federation who need it. Yes, only our primary school children maximize that. If the high school children are too big, too large, too proud to have school meals, that's a matter for them and their parents. But I'm saying that our children are provided with the resources to go to school and do well. As it comes to paying for the queries and so on, there's a $30 fee. For part of the meeting, I got kicked out of the meeting. The internet went. But I suspected that this might have been raised to ask CXC to waive that fee this year. If it wasn't raised, when we write to CXC to query, we are going to ask that it be raised, that it be waived. If not, I would say that the Ministry of Education would underwrite the cost this year. I don't think it would be really fair in a situation like this, you know, where people are put out of jobs because of the COVID and so on, to add that extra burden to parents. So I'm saying that out of our limited resources, the Ministry of Education can scrape some money from somewhere to underwrite the cost of the queries. But we're going to ask CXC if they would waive it. Next.
Good morning, Alicia Daniel Blake, Sugar City, 90.3 FM. This question pertains to, were there any issues with the uploading of the SBAs to the CXC platform? And I understand that the college in Grenada, this was one of their major issues. And Minister Powell, as the new Minister of Education, what is your plan of action in terms of CSEC and CAPE going forward?
We'll take the uploading question first and then Minister will respond. I don't know if Mr. Thomas can respond to that. He worked very closely with our registrar to assist his colleagues, his schools, in getting the information uploaded. And as Ms. Daniel quite rightly said, that was one of the big issues in some of the territories. They had difficulty uploading the SBAs?
Yes, as Mr. Hodge rightfully mentioned, I engage in the process of uploading SBAs as the registrar. That's something that I must do on a yearly basis. And I'm not too certain if we had upload issues, right? What we had issues with was the data capture. Oftentimes you would input grades in the system and you go back and the grades have disappeared, right? And so the data capture process was a bit problematic, and that was in fact reported. And so in terms of the uploads, one of the features of the platform or the ORS is that once you would have uploaded a particular SB or SBs for a particular subject, you would get an electronic receipt and you hold that in your inbox just in case CXC is adamant or claiming that you did not upload the SB. So that is very, very important for registrars to do. You hold on to your receipts. But in terms of the data capture, I know that in and of itself was problematic and things were being resorted and stuff like that. So those are some technical issues that must be sorted from CXC's end. Thank you.
Minister Powell.
Well, I'm not sure just how much you mean, what are we going to do about CXC and CAPE? What I can say is, while we continue to work with the CXC, our local registrars, teachers and students to ensure that the communication lines are open and we're all on the same page in terms of preparation of our students for CXCs. We here in St. Kitts and Nevis are looking at moving away from so much of a dependency on these examinations, particularly when it comes to the CSEC. We are now piloting in grades 4 and 6 in our primary schools the new curriculum that we've been working on for some time now. Hopefully from next academic year we'll be able to roll that out in terms of piloting in the secondary schools. And that new curriculum is geared towards an accredited graduation certificate. What we don't want is to continue to develop students who are geared towards simply or prepared for simply passing an exam. We are looking at developing more well-rounded, holistic learning environments and students coming out of our school system. And so that that graduation certificate that we are, that is a goal that we're targeting, we hope we'll do that. As I said, it will be accredited so that students can rely on that certificate when applying to tertiary level institutions. But that is the general plan in terms of our new curriculum going forward. Such a curriculum will include, for example, local studies, St. Kitts and Nevis studies. It will facilitate students to be prepared to continue to write CXC examinations, but certainly at the CSEC level, that will not be the main focus, but you would still be able to write those exams.
Thank you, Minister. In response to the new curriculum, we probably would have to have a press conference because there's so much more information that we want to share, especially in light of the question that was addressed to Minister. Yes, Ms. Daniel.
Yes, just a quick follow-up. I don't know if Dr. Esdale would recall, but that's actually along the lines of the question that I asked at last year's results press conference in terms of TechVoc. And I know Dr. Austin is a proponent of the technical skills. Will the new rollout of the curriculum include the skills for jobs as well? Because this is one of the concerns that has been expressed throughout the region. And will this therefore come down from the top level now in terms of preparing our students for jobs, the skills for the actual jobs, because even in times like these, we know there are certain skills that are needed for the jobs. For example, when all of the banks were closed, you would still need a plumber. So is this going to be included in this new rollout that you're speaking about?
It certainly would, and I remind persons that with the assistance of the CDB, we are currently in the process of redeveloping and in some instances rebuilding our TVET centers across our various secondary schools. Just a few weeks ago, I would have traveled over to Nevis, where they're actually building a brand new wing to the Gingerland Secondary School. And so there is a significant amount of attention that is being placed, particularly in relation to TVET courses and subjects. I'm happy that Dr. Austin would have put so much emphasis in terms of STEAM and that focus at the CFBC level. And so I said I believe we are at an even more advanced stage in relation to where we want to take our students. I agree with you. At this point in time, it is those students who are coming out of the TVET areas, which we would have wrongly so in the past deemed to be remedial, and now the students who are more employable. And so we understand that, we appreciate that, and that is certainly the direction in which we are going now.
Yeah, all students, students will be required to take X number of TVET education courses. They'll be expected to take so many courses in information technology, so many courses in communication studies. They have to complete X number of credits, including service hours, volunteer work. So yes, I don't know if Dr. Austin would want to add anything in terms of the TVET piece of it.
Thank you very much, B.S. Hodge. As I alluded to during my opening remarks, the emphasis on TVET and STEAM continues. We at CFBC, we are also revising our curricula. We are reviewing our programs. We are having advisory councils, which would consist of persons or stakeholders from business and industry who will be informing the curricular revision. So I believe that we are heading in the right direction, as Minister Howell underscored, in terms of raising the bar and preparing our students for the global challenges that we face. Thank you very much.
Yes, may I add to that? Presently in our high schools, we have engaged contractors to start working on our TVET areas within the schools. So we know that we have been focusing and we are ready to go with the various courses and programs on the TVET.
Okay, we're going to take a couple more questions, 3 or 4. We must finish by midday. Yes, okay. Ms. Harvey.
Good morning, everybody. Shanique Harvey, representing ZIZ Broadcasting Corporation. If I'm not mistaken, I think I heard that there were some discrepancies with the CAPE level foreign language results. What was found, and how are they being addressed? And another thing, Dr. Austin, would we see in the future any courses, small courses, that would be dedicated to media training?
That dedicated to?
Media training.
Media training,
yes.
Oh, okay. So, Dr. Austin.
Thank you very much for your question. Well, questions, the first one you asked would be about CAPE and discrepancies. I have noted that we are awaiting, hence in my opening statement I said that we are awaiting responses from CXC because units in French and in Spanish, pure math, units 1, 2, they're still outstanding. You asked a question about media, and this is really an exciting area for the future. All of the technicians are here with us in this press conference, videographers, etc. And it's really an exciting development for us at CFBC because we want to roll out from our, for adult and continuing education division, a course in mass communications. And you will be able to take that particular curricula in modules. So you might have an interest in print. You might have an interest in social media, blogging. So I believe that we are going to be rolling out some exciting new programs that really speak to the needs of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. And I want to thank you for raising that question about media. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Those subjects from Cape that we are querying, those are the subjects that were written after the scheduled date. You recall a storm came in, and we had to not allow students to come out to write examinations on that day. And these are the very same subjects. And I know Ms. Fleming actually addressed that matter already. So those are somewhere to be sorted out. Next.
Chairman Abel again. To Minister Powell, you're talking about possibly moving away from CSEC as the governing body for reviewing exams in St. Kitts and Nevis. There has been a push in recent months by CXC to move into the grade 6 level. Is that something that the ministry is considering, probably having or partnering with CXC to grade 6 levels or provide exams? Second thing, probably to Mr. Thomas. CXC has taken a bureaucratic approach, and that's the word that's being peddled right now, coming out of Friday's press conference. They're not taking responsibility for any of the challenges or issues facing the region right now when it comes to results, period. They're not accepting responsibility. Now, you're saying that all of the SBAs were uploaded in the system, but there's still some discrepancies when it comes to the actual results. CXC said on Friday, and the registrar rather, said on Friday that after a review, a comprehensive review of their system, they did an audit, they did not find any issue in terms of technical wise that may have led to that. So my question is, if you're saying you uploaded all your systems, all your grades and the SBAs and everything, and then CXC is saying, hey, look, we did a comprehensive review and we ain't find nothing in the system that we can say actually led to some of this, not only here in St. Kitts and Nevis, but throughout the region. How do you go forward with something like that when you guys make the presentation to CXC that everything was actually presented in the system?
Okay. Sorry.
And one final question to Dr. Esdale. In the question I asked earlier, I'm just following up. Are you saying that you support going forward that CXC move to have paper 1s instead of paper 2s be the comprehensive review, that's the paper 1s and the SBA be the comprehensive marker for exams in the region rather than including the paper 2s?
It would not be accurate, Mr. Abel, to say that CXC has taken a bureaucratic approach. In fact, they were accused by some territories of taking a bureaucratic approach, and the registrar responded directly to say that they are not taking a bureaucratic approach. What they're saying is that whatever queries they receive, they would address them. That was it. That was the story. That was the part. He's plainly said, we are not taking a bureaucratic approach. Whatever queries reach us, we would examine, we would investigate, and so on.
Let me just respond to your first question. It would not be accurate to say that we are necessarily moving away from CXC examinations. Those will continue to be available. Our preparation of our students would still allow for them to write those examinations. What we are saying is we're putting more focus on the graduation certificate. We are aware that there has been some discussion in terms of taking CXC examinations to the grade 6 level, that is not consistent with the direction in which we would like to go in St. Kitts and Nevis. So that is not something that we are taking under consideration at this point in time.
The grade 6 examination, the CPEA, we have been struggling with that. I came into the ministry, we have been struggling with that to replace the test of standards. Now, with the new curriculum, when we roll it out, the test of standard is going to disappear. As a matter of fact, it is likely to disappear for 2021. We're not going to have any need for that test of standard because we'll be doing continuous assessment based on the new curriculum. And so at one point we actually thought that we're going to go with CPEA, which is actually a cheaper way of administering an assessment to 6th graders. When we look back at the amount of money that we put into administering the test of standard, it's a lot less than doing that CPEA, and the process actually begins in grade 4. It's similar on the same principles as CXC, where they do coursework and all of those things. But there's not going to be any need once our curriculum is rolled out. 2 more questions? Okay, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Abel might want you to respond.
Yes, sorry. I was trying to really interpret your question. I'm not sure if there was a misunderstanding. Again, I did not communicate that there was an issue with the uploads. So we had no issue. So in terms of CXC getting the scripts or the samples of the students' work, that was not an issue. What I did communicate was there was, at times, grades being inputted, and when you go back, they have been removed and stuff like that. And so that's what I meant. But those things were supposedly rectified by the time the students went to take the exams. But I'm just saying those are some of the technical issues that were experienced. I don't know if that satisfies your question.
The concern is CXC is saying that, for example, let's use the example you gave earlier, that one student got an A and 2 C's, right, which, paraphrasing here, CXC is saying technically cannot happen, just saying. So if you're saying that everything went through the system, your part, and other territories are saying the same thing, and CXC is saying that nothing has happened like this, because this is what they kept regurgitating to reporters on Friday, that the complaints that they received from reporters, that is not true. That's the bottom line, basically what CXC is saying. Now, the results are saying something completely different. It can't be that Mr. Abel went into CXC's system and put 1 A and 2 C's for a student. So there must be some discrepancies somewhere along the line, and CXC is saying this did not happen on our part, basically. You're saying that everything went through from your end, but yet when we look at the bottom line, students are still having issues, preliminary issues with preliminary grades. They're still having issues. So where do we go from here, and how do we deal with this specific problem if both parties are saying this is not the case from my end?
Well, my response to you would be, again, proper channels must be observed, and the evidence are right here. I'm here looking at the result sheet, and you can actually go back into the ORS and you can run several reports to see what information or data rather would have been captured. And so once those things are presented, then I think they are grounds for good arguments. And so that's the steps. Those are the steps that we will observe in order to seek redress in these matters.
Let me also just jump in here. I think the issue, I think you're speaking 2 different things. CXC is talking about the actual process of receiving the scripts, the samples, the data. What Mr. Thomas is talking about has to do with the grading thereafter, once it has already been received by CXC. Hence, there's no way that a student can get an A and 2 C's and come out with profiles and then come out with a 1. And so there must be something wrong thereafter. One of the main issues that did arise in that Zoom call on Friday was the fact that unlike before, the final grades that would have been assigned to SBAs, for example, the grades that had been assigned by SBAs here and would have been submitted to CXC do not represent the final grade, which would have been the case in the past. And so, as Mr. Hodge indicated, every single SBA that had been submitted was basically reviewed individually. And one of the main issues that was coming up was the vast difference in the grading of scripts by CXC when compared to those that would have been graded in the individual territories. So you had instances where in the individual territories, and Mr. Hodge alluded to it, so all the various components would not have been completed or submitted, but the students had basically an A profile, whereas when reviewed, the profile was actually, say, a D, and vice versa. And so I think because of this new system, this is where a lot of these discrepancies are coming in. But this is after having received the various SBAs and different works.
Thank you. And we'll take one final question from anybody who hasn't had a chance. If you need it. Okay. Doctor, go ahead, Dr. Esdale.
Thank you, Mr. Hodge. Just to address the question that was raised with respect to, I believe, my personal opinion around CXC and its inclusion of Paper 2 in the future. Personally, I think Paper 2 is very valuable. I can tell you, for me, that's a strength. I love to write. So I do think that going forward, should CXC make the decision to, in future examination, move back towards their traditional structure, I think that's perfectly welcome. It has been proven to be reliable and valid. The case I was making is that the restructuring of an examination and the decision to only have Paper 1 along with the SBAs, so that we're relying heavily on that multiple choice, does not mean it is a less valid or reliable measure of a student's understanding. The validity of the test is in the construction of the questions, the design of the assessments, and not just the method by which you answer the question. So just for clarity, reverting back to inclusion of Paper 2, I think is perfectly valid.
Thank you. We're going to give each panelist 1 minute to make their final statement, and we're going to start with you, Dr. Austin. You recognize that we have not named students who would have been the most outstanding at their respective schools or within the country overall. That's because these results are preliminary. There's a period when we have to go through the reviews and the queries. After that period, schools would be informed as to their correct position. The correct position. All right, so at that point, the Honorable Minister would make his full presentation and name the top students and stuff like that. In the meantime, high schools would be planning, those who want to plan for the graduations and so on, and hopefully by that time, they would know who their top students are. Dr. Austin.
Thank you very much, P.S. Hodge. And in my closing remarks, I would want to definitely highlight the fact that we are still in unprecedented times. In my statement, I spoke about 2020 vision. Some people would like to cancel 2020, but I won't, because it allows us to analyze, to reflect, to dissect, and to see where we are going and what amendments we need to make to the educational ecosystem. We here at CFBC, we had to transition from face-to-face education as we knew it to a virtual modality and now into what we call blended learning. We have transitional challenges, certainly, but I look forward with a high level of expectation to what we can do and who we will become and all that we will be able to achieve in spite of and despite those challenges presented to us by the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, I offer congratulations to students, faculty, and staff for their efforts to perform at a high level. Here, we continue to strive for excellence. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Austin. Mr. Thomas?
In brief, I just want to say, like my fellow panelists, congratulations to all of the persons who sat the examinations. Congratulations to the teachers, the entire Ministry of Education, and all important stakeholders. It was a challenge, but we overcame, and it's important for us to recognize that we have other students in our care, and they require their due diligence. Thank you so much, and God bless.
Thank you, our Chief Education Officer, Dr. Isaac. Final statement.
Thank you, PS Hodge. And I must say it's a privilege to be able to have this session and to speak to our nation, to sort of giving them the information, releasing this information to them pertaining to the way our students have performed both in the CSEC and the CAPE examinations. I must continue to state that we at the Ministry of Education, we are working really hard, especially at this time where we have to put in place continuous assessment, because we may say that we looked at the results from the CSEC and the CAPE this year and they have improved, but we also have to realize that the students that we're preparing for next year, that we have to make sure that we are preparing them well so that we do not see an opposite or a decrease because of what may have happened with them not having enough exposure, or even if there is another lockdown have to come, that they would not be engaged on the virtual platform. We are doing our best in terms of getting devices for students and our teachers so that we can continue to engage them. And going forward, we not only want our teachers to engage them face-to-face, but we have invested with the online platform, the MS Teams, and we want them to continue even further, because we know that's what's happening globally, that students have been engaged with the modality, a blended approach. And we want to encourage our teachers to continue to openly engage our students in that way. So congratulations again to all our students and for the private candidates that took the exams this year. Hearty congratulations to you. And to our country, our nation as a whole, we would like to say thanks to all those who have really helped the stakeholders during the times when the students were not able to even have their teachers face-to-face. We say thank you for the ways you helped. Some students were able to get, they got food packages to their homes. Our guidance counselors would have counseled parents who are having difficulties even when the students were not getting to have the face-to-face instructions with their teachers. So everybody, they were doing their part to sort of help the situation. And for that, we are grateful. So once again, thanks to everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Esdale. Thank you, Dr. Isaac. Next person to speak is Dr. Esdale.
Thank you, Mr. Hodge. I just want to, once again, commend all of those who would have worked so hard to ensure that our students were able to sit examinations. I also want to encourage our teachers and our students who will shortly be registering and who will be taking examinations in the future. I recognize that by and large, as was said by our Chief Education Officer, we did have some successes, some increases in performance. But I recognize that St. Kitts and Nevis was one of the last countries in the Eastern Caribbean to close schools. We would have closed just 1 week shy of our scheduled Easter break, which meant that the majority of our secondary students would have essentially, give or take 5 days, completed 2 full terms of secondary education, which meant that the majority of them, had they kept to their schedules, should have completed their SBAs, should have completed much of what they needed to be successful. And when they returned to school, had they returned from Easter break immediately, really would have moved into revision more than anything else. You know, the process of learning new content or adding new content would have significantly slowed. Only in cases where maybe students were behind would new content have been added. Students would have been focused on revision. I want to commend our secondary school principals and our school leaders, their teams that banded together to really get the schools ready so that when the Ministry of Education was granted that special provision to allow students who were sitting exams to come back in, all the necessary COVID-19 protocols were in place for students and for teachers to safely be on the physical grounds and to undertake the necessary revision for successfully sitting these exams. I want us to turn our attention to, however, as Mr. Thomas would have indicated, to the students who are about to register and who are about to sit future exams, because they're in a very different scenario. Right now in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have returned to face-to-face education, but the need for blended education exists. There has been, as our CEO said, a major investment in MS Teams. And I encourage all teachers, I encourage all parents to ensure that students are getting onto that platform and learning how to use it. And the reality is that there's so many opportunities to do so. Currently across the region, UNESCO is launching a series, the first one today for teachers, another one tomorrow for parents and students, and a final one for educators, all on how to maximize Microsoft and MS Teams as a platform for learning. I say this because I think most of us are very well aware that while we are engaging in face-to-face education, the majority of our secondary schools are on shift. So unlike our students who are now receiving their marks, who would have had face-to-face education all day, every day for full 2 academic terms, this new set of students are actually going to be learning and sitting exams under extraordinary conditions as well, because they spend less time face-to-face in school. And so this is a plea to all parents, to all teachers, to ensure that when our students are not in that classroom, that the process of teaching and learning continues. Once again, I just want to close by extending congratulations to all of those who would have performed so well in their regional examinations, and for those who may not have received the results that they would have liked, to persevere and to try again. And of course, naturally, the Ministry of Education, in conjunction with schools, will do a full analysis and will attempt to address any of the concerns that would have come out of the marking and assessment of the work submitted by our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Esdale. We move to the Honorable Minister for the final word.
Young Miss Destiny Morris was on the mark when she penned this year's Independence message of resilience, innovation, and security for Independence 2020. I think our students, teachers, education system has shown that as Kittitians and Divisions, we are very resilient people. And we've had to rely on our innovation to ensure the security of our future through ensuring that our students had the necessary preparations, had the necessary opportunities to approach these examinations and to have generally done very well. Like every other year gone by that we've had students writing CXC examinations, we have queries, we have questions. That is nothing new to us. But I want for us not to allow those to distract us from the successes that we have been able to achieve through our students and our teachers in particular, our dedicated teachers and resilient students. I'm happy to say that it was just last week, I think it was Friday, on a Zoom call with UNESCO and member states, where we are being asked as a nation to make certain commitments towards the security of our education systems worldwide. I'm happy to report that all of the various commitments that are being asked of us and asked of all of our neighbors in the region and the world over, St. Kitts and Nevis has already implemented every single one of those. The only commitment that I needed to make was to continue to do what we're doing now. We are ahead of the curve. We are doing well as a nation. We have done well to be able to not just fight this global pandemic, but to ensure that we've been able to resume schools in a safe way for both students and teachers, that we have what it takes to undertake the face-to-face as well as electronic modalities of instruction. Our students and teachers and our system has undergone not just a global pandemic in COVID-19, but in recent times we've had to deal with distractions such as storms, distractions such as a very heated general election, and all of the other things, all of the other issues and distractions that come naturally from life. And we are beating all of those. We are not being distracted. We are continuing to progress and to look forward. And 2020 has been a challenging year, but 2021 is just around the corner. And I have every confidence that our education system is poised to ensure the success of our students going forward and to build the capacity of our teachers to excel not just in the instruction, but to excel in their own personal development through the several courses that are now being taken advantage of at the CFBC. We have more students, more teachers coming out with bachelor's degrees and master's degrees, and these are all the successes that we cannot allow COVID-19 to distract us away from. So I use this final opportunity to commend all of our teachers in particular and our education system, all those who work not just in the schools but behind the scenes, so to speak, our parents for helping the children and the children themselves for really digging deep and for achieving what they have. Those who have issues, we're going to sort them out and they will be rectified. But I think generally speaking, we should be proud of our students and teachers and our education system as a nation.
Thank you, Minister. We have a reminder from the registrar that is $30 US for a review, $60 Bayesian. Queries are free. I want to thank you, the media, for making the time available to be here today. I also wish to thank the CFBC for the use of their conference room. Just in case you don't know, they have a very beautiful conference room here, and you can use it, you can rent it. Yes, thank you very much. And to our excellent panel, has done a very good job at this press conference. And ZIZ, we thank ZIZ for carrying this press conference on all of their platforms, and we thank you so much for your service to the nation. ZIZ, the nation station. Thank you.
During the global pandemic, I found it easy to study because we had more time, we had a lot of free time, and we had extra time to gain more knowledge.
Well, for me, the only difficulty that I had during this pandemic was finishing the integrated maths syllabus. I feel as though for a subject that has mathematical problems, it should be done face-to-face or on a board rather than you just going and watching videos, because there are so much videos you could watch, yes, but each of them would have their different perspective as to which problems, how you could solve the problems, etc.
It was a mixed bag because on one hand, it's less stressful because, well, you're at home, so you could just look about your information and all that stuff and manage your own time and everything, but at the same time, it was kind of more difficult to get past papers because you had to kind of search them up on your own, do group chats and everything, and some people have video classes, Zoom and all that stuff, and that's another stress. Quite frankly, the pandemic was something. This whole studying pandemic was just something that I don't think I want to experience ever again.
Dealing with this pandemic and getting ready for exams, it was kind of difficult because we're not at school, and it was hard finding past papers and stuff. But after finishing this exam, I felt kind of relieved because this is my last one. And it was kind of easy because one of the past papers I got most of the tests and the questions came back.
Relieved, tired, and I just hope I pass. That's it. That's all I worry about. I just hope I pass.
It was kind of difficult because we already accustomed to being in school, physically talking and interacting with the teachers and the classmates, but because of the pandemic we had to be online, and being online meant we had distractions from computers and with cell phones, we just home. Yeah.
My name is Alester Seaton. I go to the virtual high school. For exam this year, it was a bit challenging as we had to make the big change from physical to virtual learning, and I guess it still had its advantages as we already had to make use of the internet for studying purposes and so on, so I guess it was just a matter of change.
It was a little bit difficult because we had to enter Zoom classes online and using laptops and phone, and so we had a little distraction because of the media.
I feel really well as the teacher was really good. He knew what he was doing throughout the year.
This pandemic had its pros and cons. Nonetheless, we learned different things. We also learned how to be taught virtually, but we had to stay at a good distance from each other, and for the last term in school couldn't be completed like good because of this pandemic.
The exams to me was alright, and I love that. I love the effort I put out, and I hope that I pass all subjects.
The exam was good. I feel sure, feel certain, feel confident.
Well, during the pandemic it wasn't hard because when we found out that we only gained one paper, it was very easy, so we had to practice on the one paper. So
in preparing for my exams during this pandemic, I feel like it was hectic, yeah. However, on the bright side, we had more time to prepare for exams. Not saying that the pandemic is a good thing, but just looking at it from a positive point of view, that's how I feel.
I agree with Tabitha. It was hectic, but I enjoy the free time and the spare time that they gave us to study so we can better in our exam. But the exams were very hard, but some of them were easy. But the pandemic, I wish it was something different than the COVID-19, but I like that we only had to do paper one.